Start by saying that if you want these beautiful Baba flag socks, they are made by, what does it say?
Living
Royal. And since we live with the king, we're living royal. So everybody got the socks?
Yeah.
Okay. So what we're going to do is I want you to close your eyes, and we're going to go back to the early 1980s when the Mondoli were still alive. And just come with me on this journey. You can keep your eyes open if you want to. But. From this book, The Watertight Rosebud. This is Appendix A. A Letter from India, Part 1. This account of sights, sounds, and smells of a 1987, that was the year, trip to India, and Mayor Baba's home was captured in the January 1987 issue of the Hardy News, of my personal newsletter. Many people have asked what it's like to go there. It's not easy to capture experiences not wholly tangible, but here goes. Arrival in Bombay. First impressions. A peculiar, sweet, but not totally clean smell. With it comes a whole flood of sensations associated with India. First, the drab, dirty airport in Bombay, Mumbai. Long lines, standing around waiting to clear immigrations and customs, to change money, to confirm reservations. Nothing in a hurry, nothing even seemingly to work, but you let go, let it flow in its own time. The opposite of Western efficiency, the opposite of keeping one's word. They say, yes, yes, madam. And maybe it turns out to be so, maybe not. The way you cope is to keep on going, to try something different, to ask again. Weighty inertia. You can't get them to be efficient, you just wait them out. Events are measured in 1-2 hour times. Then the city. Dirty concrete apartment buildings and offices, hastily erected and already falling to pieces. Some not yet finished with bamboo scaffolding, others looking like they need a good scouring with chlorinated bleach. Beneath them, shanty towns of brown huts, tin roofs, gunny sack and bamboo matting for walls. Everywhere, dirt, dust, mud, dogs lying half dead in the streets, oblivious to the mass of scooters, taxis, buses spewing forth black soot, horns sounding. Everywhere people, bright sun, palm trees, the steamy, warm earth, light and fertility. Nothing very solid, nothing very clean, but soon to breed something new. This is third world modern Asia, resting lightly and uneasily on the top of a more ancient motherland. Village life. Outside the city, past the factories where the land stretches as far as you can see, are little patches of green. Millet, wheat, fruit orchards, and clusters of trees. And there are some nice photos in the book. Here the pace is slower. In a taxi to Ahmednagar, I passed village after village, each one with its homes of mud and cow dung, topped with thatched roofs, each one with its communal well, ropes, and wooden buckets. The women in blue and green saris are carrying water home on their heads in large brass pots. The men are out plowing the fields with bullocks and wooden plows. Groups of school children make their way to the village school. Boys in white shirts and khaki shorts, and girls in white blouses and blue skirts, their braided hair tied with bright red ribbons. The taxi slows up now to pass a wooden bullock cart driven by an old man in a red turban. Ahead, a flock of goats tended by little boys with sticks ambles across the road. From the other direction comes a red and yellow ST, state transport bus, all the windows up with people and luggage sticking out everywhere. It is followed by several flatbed trucks with wooden sides decorated brightly with pink lotus flowers and Hindi writing. Sometimes even a marigold garland hanging from the hood up front, and on the back, in English, the ever-present sound, "Horn, please." This is no minor directive as vehicles in both directions hurtle towards one another on the one-lane roads, pulling off to the side only at the last moment. Passing one of these trucks requires at a minimum loss of vigorous horn sounding and a certain amount of luck and intuition about the traffic ahead until the vehicle pulls over and the way is clear. Pilgrim Centers. This is the old Pilgrim Center. This particular journey is finite, and eventually it ends at the Meher Pilgrim Center, a brick residential facility about 10 miles outside the city of Ahmednagar, provided by the Avatar Meher Baba Trust for visitors at Mehrabad. The MPC is a bit like a monastery, resembling the cloisters, and a bit like an oasis of tropical beauty and Western comfort in the midst of rural India. One arrives here numb from travel, unbelievably tired, dusty, and jangled by culture shock. A staff worker with a friendly face is there to check you in at the office. Soon suitcases are carried and you will find yourself in a cool room with clean sheets, whitewashed walls, and high ceilings. Outside are covered stone walkways and courtyards filled with lush plants and flowers, and down the hall are a clean bathroom with other friendly faces. The first thing that hits you is the stillness. Often everyone else is away when you first arrive, and the contrast is marked. But even when friends arrive back from the bus and the hill, you greet old friends and catch up on news. The stillness remains. It is background to the chatter, also there to greet you. A wash, a short nap, a chance to unpack and arrange things. Eventually you start to feel yourself again. A bell announces lunch or dinner, and you head towards the dining room, a huge refectory-like hall in between the men's and women's sides. Buffet tables hold large platters of food: rice, dal, lentils, shredded cabbage and tomatoes, spicy vegetables, chutneys, and yogurt. The rule is you can take as much as you like, but what you take, you have to finish. And it's easy to overestimate. Your plate is a round stainless steel tray that holds more than you expect. Quickly you discover that day at the Pilgrim Center is punctuated by meals. A bell wakes you at 6 a.m. for tea. Breakfast is at 8, lunch at 1, tea at 4, and dinner again at 8. You spend this time catching up on news, discussing the day's events, or discovering more about the people who are here. Bonds are formed, confidences are exchanged, and something about the place encourages that. And here is the picture of the tomb that was on the cover, was drawn on the cover of Welcome Home. And it actually was a picture I took, I think. Because there's Mansari and who's the other guy? Nanakar waving. Welcome home. Mehrabad Hill is a place where Meher Baba's body is buried. His tomb is a small stone building with a white dome, no more than 20 feet square, with mastery and servitude inscribed on the outside, along with the symbols of the world's religions. I make my way up the hill, past the railroad tracks, and along a dusty road shaded by banyan trees. Ahead of me is the stone wall and tower of the building, where the women disciples stayed in the days when Mehrabad was Meher Baba's ashram. Beyond that is the tomb. As I approach, strangely enough, no one else seems to be around. A yellow dog comes over and follows me the rest of the way. Under the tin roof shading the entrance, Nanakar, one of the staff, sits reading a newspaper. As I remove my shoes, Nana comes over to embrace me. "Welcome home," he says warmly. "Welcome home." I touch the rough-hewn stones on the outside with my fingers. They are cool to the touch. A welcome mat lies in front of the small doorway. "Welcome home," it echoes in red letters. I cross the threshold and step inside. The floor is smooth beneath my feet. All around, the walls are painted with images of village men and women who seem to have come from Meher Baba's darshan, blessing. On one side, Meher Baba is holding a person in his arms. On the other side, he sits with a small child at his feet. Above, inside the dome, he looks down, encircled by a host of angelic faces. The horizontal white marble tombstone with gold letters reads, "Eternal Beloved, Avatar Meher Baba, February 25th, 1894, January 31st, 1969. I have not come to teach, but to awaken." Beneath it, Meher Baba's physical body is buried. Just now, a silk cloth covers the marble. On top of that are piled garlands of bright and fragrant flowers, jasmines, roses, marigolds, chrysanthemums. Some of the loose flowers form hearts, others spell out the word love. Stillness here is even more intense. I bow down and touch the silken cloth and the flowers with my forehead. Something from within swells up, merges with a deep pool of silence and is gone. I move over and sit cross-legged on the floor. All around the marble stone, little ants weave their way in and out of the jasmine and roses. They are busy, intent on gathering nectar. I sit motionless, focused on the same goal. Time seems longer here. Thoughts and feelings come, are imagined, and eventually drift away. Eventually, the moment feels truly felt. With a deep sigh, I get up to leave. The warm Indian sun is shining brightly outside as I make my way down the hill and back to the Pilgrim Center. A day at Mirazad. Mirazad was Baba's residence in the latter years. The trust bus takes people out there on Tuesdays, Thursdays, Saturdays, and Sundays. The staff packs lunch for us in large metal tins, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, fried vegetable patties of various sorts, hard-boiled eggs, raw tomatoes, carrots, and cucumbers. We board the bus at 10 a.m. It stops at the trust office in town for 15 minutes in case anyone needs to do business. You can take care of travel arrangements, buy photos or books, and there's even a lending library of all the paperback books people have brought and left here. Then the bus horn honks and we all pile in again. The bus heads out the long, deserted road that stretches from town, past the Parsi Tower of Silence, the Army Artillery Range, a gravel business, and on toward Pimplegown Malvi Village and the water reservoir. Since there has been scanty rain now for the past 4 years, the reservoir is almost dried up. Just as the road bends, you see a long, tree-lined driveway. On the left, the road to Baba's door. Red and white signs proclaim in Hindi and English that this is Mirazad residence, and then it says so in Hindi. Baba's neighbors are peasant farmers. Usually you see a few cows tethered in front of their houses and a few barefoot children playing nearby. At the end of the road is Baba's gate. Behind it are a number of low white buildings covered with brilliant pink and white bougainvillea vines. Mirazad is like a beautiful oasis in the midst of dusty farm fields. Meher Baba's chief woman disciple, has planted gardens all around with marigolds, geraniums, and other bright flowers. As you arrive from the bus, Dr. Goher's free clinic is on the right, and ahead of you is a tin-roofed veranda with a number of turquoise benches. This part of Mirazad is known as the men's side. Usually 1 or 2 of the Mandali, household disciples, Alaba, Katie, Erich, or Mani, are there to greet visitors with hugs and chit-chat, and especially warm welcomes for first-timers and those who've just arrived. People put their things in several rooms that open off the veranda, and then usually head towards Mandali Hall, a long, narrow room with stone flooring, now covered with carpets and cushions. And here's the picture of the shoe parking lot that you've probably seen on Facebook. You take off your shoes before entering. In a corner on the right is Baba's high-backed armchair, usually garlanded with flowers from the garden. The walls are painted lemon yellow, and the window frames a glossy turquoise. Colors here are bright, just like sunlight and flowers, very strong and intense, but it all seems to blend well. Erich takes his seat, the one he customarily had when Baba sat in the hall, in a far corner under one of the windows. People come in, some bow at the chair, and then all settle in, finding a seat against one of the walls or in the rugs close to Erich. As the talk commences, a feeling of lift comes over the hall. It feels a little like a group meeting, a little like a royal audience, and a little like a family reunion. New people are introduced. They tell the story of how they happened to come here. News is exchanged from back home. Then Erich is reminded of a story. He starts to tell it, sometimes in great detail. 30 minutes pass, perhaps. Someone gets up to go, others come in. In the middle of the story, Baba catches you by surprise. The feeling of being in his presence is so natural that you forget how wonderful and unique it feels. Then something reminds you, perhaps the glow and openness in the faces around the room, and you marvel. How could I ever have forgotten this feeling? Baba, you are amazing. Sometimes the women Mandali appear at the back of the hall and seat themselves in a few of the straight chairs there. Mani pops in through the doors and seats herself cross-legged just in front of Baba's chair. "Ah, yes, Eric," she said, "that reminds me of another story." And soon she is off in its telling, animatedly acting out all of the characters. The end produces a laugh from all, and then she pops off as deftly as she enters. Erich picks up the thread again, or perhaps a silence settles in over the group. Someone may voice a question, or someone sing a song. Mira is over on her porch, someone says, and a number of people get up to leave. You walk through the garden, and in front of you is another building. A yellow two-story structure with a veranda in front. This is the women's bungalow, and it includes the bedroom where Baba would rest at night. Baba's room is a separate entrance off to the left, up a few stone steps. Inside is a wooden four-poster bed with a short pink canopy and a pink flowered bedspread. Baba's photo is propped up in the middle of it, garlanded with a few choice roses. This is also a kind of meditation space. Later, people will come and spend private time here. Everything feels pink and sweet and very, very pure. When thoughts wander elsewhere, you can sit here and feel Baba's presence very palpably. But back to Mira's porch. By now, Mira has come out and is seated in a low armchair, surrounded by a row of chairs and stools. Women mostly take the ones nearby. Men cannot touch Mira by Baba's order. But there is still plenty of spaces left to sit, including benches arranged into sort of bleachers. Several of the women Mandali, like Meru, are there to help the conversation along, introducing people, mentioning where someone is from. Here the flavor is light, with everyone trying their best to be gracious and entertain Mira. Mostly the theme is love and beauty. Weighty matters and questions are left for Mandali Hall. Mira's eyes are dark and sparkling, and they light up when she starts to talk about Baba. She has a few choice stories, and often she simply brings out a few things to show. Cards from people in the West or funny newspaper articles that people have sent her. 2 different days recently, she brought out a pair of inch-long, tiny sandals that a sandal maker had made for Baba. Baba put his little fingers in them, and we all try it too. The lunch bell rings at 1 p.m., but no one seems in a hurry to leave. Then Meru says, "Time for lunch," and we all begin drifting back over to the men's side. On long tables are spread the packed lunches. We take bright colored plastic plates and fill them up. People sit on long wooden benches and continue conversations and news as they eat. After lunch, a few hardy souls decide to climb Seclusion Hill, a hill where Baba worked in seclusion. They put on sun hats, get walking sticks from the pile, and are off until tea. The walk goes up out of Mirazad, over plowed fields, past a few wells now dry, and on to the base of Seclusion Hill. Stones painted white mark the route to the top. The path winds for several hundred feet, first diagonally right, then doubling back to the left, and finally on to the top. Along the way, stones catch your eye, some quartz crystal and some green with copper flecks. The wind is strong now. It sweeps forcefully across the sun-baked plain. A few more steps and you are on the top of everything. You sit on a stone, holding your hat, and survey the countryside below. In a 360-degree arc, the whole earth seems to be spread out before you in neat little square and triangle pieces. The fields, a few huts, a herd of goats tended by little boys. Further over, another village with its collection of trees, and then more fields. All is still, calm, eternal. Back at Mirazad, Alaba is ringing the bell for tea. Rush out, he calls. In Mandali Hall, Erich is still telling a story. Alaba returns again to the door. Rush out, he booms again. Erich finishes the story, and we all troop out to the veranda. Now the tables are spread with white cups and saucers. Servants pour hot tea from a big brass kettle, a light mixture including lemongrass and mint. More chit-chat. Perhaps it's somebody's birthday. Small pieces of pound cake appear on the saucers. We sing rousing courses of happy birthday. This is also a time when some of the women are invited by Mira to have tea with her later at Baba's table. The list rotates so all have a chance. For those of us lucky enough to be chosen, the prospect of 2 teas is delightful, and we make sure to report promptly at 4:30 on Mira's porch. Meru and Gohar are there, but Mira is busy inside. Eventually she appears at the doorway. We stand. Come in, she says with her delightful laugh, and we follow her through the hallway and past Baba's parlor. Taking a sharp right, we are in the dining room where Baba ate his meals. Baba's chair stands at the head of the table, and a small glass bowl filled with flowers sits at his plate. The table is now surrounded by many stools, so more will fit. 2 brass pots of tea stand on hot pads covered with tea cozies. The cozies are designed so that the brass spouts of the pots peek out through a gap in the fabric. Other pitchers hold hot milk. We each pick a seat, and one of the girls helps Mira serve the puff-rice mixture into small plastic dishes that already hold a couple of cookies. We pass them around and then pour our tea and pass the milk and sugar. Mira sips her tea out of a big mug and, as frequently the custom, pours a little out onto the saucer. This cools the overly hot tea, and then she sips it from the saucer. Someone asks a question. What was Baba's favorite flower, Mira? Or, how did Baba like his tea? Mira's laugh is a little like a giggle and a bird's chirp. Her voice is soft, but with a certain distinct inflection. One thing leads to another. A flashback to the 1920s at Mirabad, or remembering a Tonga race at Muradabad. As she talks, a small black bird flies in and lights on the slate windowsill where a dish of grain is waiting. It cocks its head too, as if to listen, and nibbles the grain and flies off. All too soon we hear the bell ringing in the distance, warning us the bus will lose soon. Eventually Mira finishes her story. She rises and stands before the large framed picture of Baba. We join her. Baba, darling, help us to be worthy of your precious love, she says softly. Baba, help us to love you as you should be loved. A long, intense silence. Then she turns with a laugh again, and we follow her out onto the porch. Others are waiting there to say goodbye. One of the women Mandali produces small brown parcels of candy, prasad, for Mira to give to those who are leaving soon. For women, Mira accompanies the prasad with a warm embrace. For men, she holds it by the string and carefully drops it into their waiting hands with a smiling Jai Baba. As we move back across the garden to the other side, we continue to watch the tableau. Mira is standing waving at us with a twinkling smile on her face. Jai Baba, we all call as we leave. On the men's veranda, more hugs and goodbyes. Time to board the bus, Oliva's voice booms again. It helps to move people a little, but there is no sense of urgency. Time to hug Mani goodbye, time to hug Erich. Slowly, all make their way to the bus. The Mandalis stand alongside, waving as the bus pulls out. Avatar, Mayor Baba, Ki Jai, we shout. They are still waving as we speed down this tree-lined drive, dust flying us behind us. A good day, I think. By now the sun is starting to set. We follow its progress on the ride home. It sets just over Baba's tomb as we finally reach Mirabad. Parting is such sweet sorrow. So the days pass, permeated by this sweetness. As the time draws near to leave, the thought intrudes, how can I ever leave this? I can't leave this. Some people stay months or even years, but no matter how long, the day eventually seems to draw near. Sometimes you pull back gradually and are eager to get back to the next phase of your life. Other times you block it out entirely and find yourself suddenly loading luggage in a taxi and hugging friends goodbye with tears coming to your eyes as the taxi pulls off in a cloud of dust and a hearty Jai Baba. The separation is only apparent, you say. God, this love is really everywhere. I don't really have to leave it. That's okay until the countryside streams past you in reverse and you hassle again with taxis and planes, interminable waits, sterile airports, fatigue and exhaustion. But miraculously, whiffs of that essence return at odd moments. You feel it and try one more time to discover its presence in your everyday life, not just in India.
You really captured the experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, absolutely.
When I read this later and put it in the book, I couldn't believe I wrote it. Well, I didn't actually write it in some ways, but I wrote it. There's some other things in the appendix that might be worth reading. One of them is Registrar of Births and Deaths. And in the newsletter for the group, I put the profiles of Alfred Hitchcock and Meher Baba. And in one of Alfred Hitchcock's films, I forget what the door said, it was something like Registrar of Births and Deaths. Alfred Hitchcock was one of the most recognized movie producers and directors in the world. Most of this is attributed to the personal appearances he made in his own films. They became his trademark in every film he made after 1927. Part of the universal joke of these cameo roles was that they broke the film's illusion momentarily and reminded us of its creator. It was as though Hitchcock mirrored the role of the avatar, who also produces, directs, and stars in his own film of creation. Hitchcock's role even reflected many of Baba's silent walk-on parts. For a minute, we saw him as the man in the crowd, someone on a train, a man begging alms, a musician with his instrument, a photograph in a newspaper, and a figure behind a door labeled Registrar of Births and Deaths. By appearing in human form, the avatar reminds us that life is just a show and that only God is real. And then I did the quote that I had at the back of the main part of the section, that the author of the drama, Meher Baba said, in his imaginative production, himself becomes all the actors and plays the game of hide and seek in order to come into full and conscious possession of his own creative infinity. Infinity has to go through the illusion of finiteness to know itself as infinity, and the author has to play the parts of all the actors to know himself as the author of this greatest detective story worked out through the cycles of creation. So, one of the things I read yesterday are these funny bits where Baba sort of tips his hand at you, so you know he's there. And what I say at some point in there is that he doesn't do this ongoing. He does it in the beginning just to make sure you realize that he's there and that you really aren't crazy, that you love him. And then after that, you don't need them anymore. But I needed them, so I got some of them. And the first one is at Smith College. I went to Smith College. And I heard about Baba the summer of my junior year from a Sufi in California. And I came back with the family letters, and because I subscribed to them, and so I knew about Baba's seclusion. And I will go back and read you a part of them, but this is a thing that happened at a place called Sage Hall, which was the auditorium at Smith College at the time. And this is the winter of my senior year. My roommate and I were in an auditorium at Sage Hall watching the movie Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, directed by Mike Nichols. I had wanted to see it because the exterior shots were filmed at Smith about a year or two ago before that, and their home in the film was Tyler Annex, just across from Sage Hall. Tyler Annex was one of the faculty houses, or maybe their offices were there. It was a little tiny, Northampton house. After that, I had planned to go downtown to see another movie starring Alan Bates. At the start of the movie, George and Martha's marriage seems very similar to my parents'. Martha is dominant, while George sits back passively. By the end of the film, their roles have reversed. George confronts Martha about their fantasy son and kills him off in front of their guests. At the end of the film, Richard Burton and Elizabeth sit in the window seat of Tyler Annex, and he sings, "Who's afraid of Virginia Woolf?" And she responds, "I am George, I am." And with that, their hands clasped in front of the bay window. Then the focus shifts, it was a cut, and you see the building beyond, Sage Hall. And the lights came on in Sage Hall, and I felt as if I had come out of the film and into reality. I was so moved that I started crying. When we got outside, my roommate asked me, "Are you okay?" "Yes," I replied. "I'm going to see the King of Hearts." And as I spoke these words, I felt as if I was speaking lines in another movie that had been scripted for me to say. And
was the movie, The King of Hearts?
That was Alan Bates with the crazy people in The King of
Yeah,
Hearts.
that's a great movie.
It was a great
Yeah.
movie.
Isn't that a great movie?
One of the best.
And
We should show it here, it's really
Yeah, that'd be
good.
great.
And this is about Butch Cassidy, the Sundance Kid. And I had already heard about Baba. I'd already gone to Darshan, which you can read about here, and you can read about it in the Empty Chair, if you remember that book. But this movie, I saw in Cambridge after I told Andy Lesnick about Baba in the September 1968 year. And I'm going to go back because Baba said in his newsletter that he had completed his work in June of 1968, 100% to his satisfaction, and that it would manifest from September of 1968. And in September 1968, I was working at a Harvard dorm called Quincy House, and my boss was an American Transcendentalist professor, and he had tutorials in his office, and this guy with glasses, dark hair, came in for his tutorial, and he saw my Baba card, and I picked it up and handed it to him, and he said, "Who's that?" And I said, "Well, that's Mayor Baba. He says he's God." And Andy Lesnick took it and thoughtfully, looked at it and then gave it back to me. So that was kind of the beginning of a lot of stuff that September. But after that, I was at the theater in Cambridge, and Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid was filmed in 1968 and came to a theater in Harvard Square in the fall of 1969. It had another of Baba's messages for me. The film begins with an old-time sepia sequence showing outlaws running from the law. Then the film turns into color, and you are right there with Butch and Sundance as they hide out with their friend, Etta, a local schoolteacher. Butch and Sundance are called the Hole in the Wall Gang, and they have a lucrative career. Well, it says here robbing banks. Actually, I think they rob the bank transports in trains. They would attack the train and get the money. But eventually, one of the lawmen vows to capture them. At this point, they talk to Etta about their plans to get out of town and travel to Bolivia. She responds, "I'm 26, and I'm single and a school teacher, and that's the bottom of the pit. The only excitement I've known is here with you now. So I'll go with you and I won't whine. I'll sew your socks and I'll stitch you up when you're wounded. I'll do anything you ask of me, except one thing. I won't watch you die." I'll miss that scene if you don't mind. So they travel to Bolivia and begin their outlaw career again. While they are robbing banks, the swingle singers are singing, ba 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 ba. Things get dangerous, and eventually Etta leaves. Butch and Sundance are finally holed up in a building surrounded by Bolivian soldiers and the American posse. They joke with each other as they rush the posse and are killed in a burst of gunfire. Burst of gunfire. Then the film dissolves back into sepia for the titles, reinforcing the message that it was just a film, just an illusion. As I watched the end, I had a minor epiphany. I had always felt badly that I wasn't very brave or heroic. But now I realized that I didn't have to be the hero. I could just be the woman. I came out of the film and crossed Mass Ave to the bus stop by the entrance to Harvard Yard. All of a sudden, a man turned the corner and stopped right in front of me. He said, "That's a nice dress you're wearing." I was wearing a kind of peasant dress with a calico skirt. All the time he was speaking to me, inwardly I was saying, "Baba, Baba," because the man had so immediately reinforced my realization. Baba was sending the message, yes, you got it. Then the man went on to Harvard Yard, and I had the feeling that if I had gone after him, he wouldn't be there anymore. And here's the footnote. I saw the movie again in Myrtle Beach when I was teaching school there. A group of us were seeing it together at a local theater. When Etta Place utters the line, "I'm 26, and I'm single and a school teacher, and that's the bottom of the pit," Marshall Hay laughed and pointed at me. The odd thing was, it was 1971. I was 26, single and a school teacher. The rest I won't comment on. Just good. Yeah, what else do we have here? Well, I might read you the Elizabeth Patterson story, which is a good one.
Oh, good.
This is called Elizabeth in Charge. The center closed for the first time in November 1970 for repairs and renovations. It was going to be 3 weeks closed. Winnie Barrett and I were living together in North Myrtle Beach, and one night, when we threw a party, a colorfully painted VW bus pulled up at our house, and 4 people got out. Andy Lesnick, his friend Malcolm Clay, Malcolm's wife Barbara, and Malcolm's sister Mary Clay. They said they wanted to see the center. We told them unfortunately it was closed, but we went over to Kitty Elizabeth's house to see what could be arranged. Not only did they get to see the center, Elizabeth put them to work helping with the renovations. Elizabeth was usually in the background at the center, but there was no question she was in charge. One night I called up Kitty and Elizabeth to ask which movie was being shown that Saturday night at the center. This is like completely canceled now with all these, lists of what's going on, but she said, you should come to the center because you want to be there, not because you want to watch a particular film. I stood corrected. One night at the weekly discourse meeting, the group got into a discussion about Baba's discourse on sex. Someone in the group advanced the view that you couldn't always believe what was in the discourses because the Sufis had edited and changed them. Sufism Reordered had published the current version in 1967. One of the women in the group was a Sufi who lived in Myrtle Beach. Her name was Beth, and she worked at the press. I found the talk disturbing, but I found the talk afterwards in the original kitchen even more disturbing. Isn't it great how Baba works, one fellow said, stirring things up like this? Suddenly the door opened and Elizabeth walked in. She sat down in one of the armchairs. I always knew Baba was the awakener, she said, but I didn't expect to be awakened tonight at 9 o'clock about a call about your discourse meeting. Let me assure you, she went on, that everything in the discourses was dictated by Meher Baba. I was there. He dictated one discourse for each issue of the Meher Baba Journal. She said the content had not changed in any substantive way in the subsequent editions. With that, the fog cleared, and I felt instantly reassured that no schism was about to start. Another incident illustrated Elizabeth's way of always being on top of things. I had read some of Baba's discourses to Bob, a blind friend in Cambridge, as Bob Holt, the fellow who eventually wrote the song The Ocean of Love after touching the shells, spelling out that on the beach path. Bob was coming to the center, and I agreed to help him find his way around. We were down at the boathouse, and Bob had the idea he wanted to climb up on the roof. He's blind and he wants to climb up on the roof. I thought the idea highly dangerous, but I seemed powerless to stop him. He actually grabbed hold of some of the boards and got himself up there. I plaintively cried, Bob, please come down. And wouldn't you know, just about then, Elizabeth's car drove up. She got out and came down to the boathouse to see what was going on. By that time, Bob had lowered himself almost to the ground. I was so glad to see her. She was on top of the situation, and Bob, thankfully, was not. All right. This is a long piece about how come I called this book Watertight Rosebud. In the beginning, Polly Branch had a dream, and we both lived here, and I lived in North Myrtle Beach with her. And in her dream, her mother said, those Baba people never do anything. And Polly countered, no, Ann Giles has written this book. It's on your table there, it's Watertight Rosebud. And Polly has no memory of this dream, but I remember the title because it was so intuitive. I thought, I was a watertight rosebud. And followed by that, I went to India in 1972, and Muhammad, in fact, I need to sort of tell you even more about this. So I go into Mandalay Hall, and Roger Blewett is there with his camera. And Muhammad said something to Padri in Marathi. And Padri translated, he wants to look at your rose robe. And I was wearing this pink dress. And I had to stand there like this for 10 minutes with my arms open. And Roger Blewett was dancing around in front of Muhammad, taking all these pictures. And Muhammad let him do it. And I suspect it was so I would have pictures to show the watertight rosebud rose dress. Padre explained that I was now Muhammad's prisoner. And apparently this was something Muhammad had been doing with other visitors from time to time. At the time, I was wearing a deep pink dress that I'd made the summer before. And I thought maybe it was my conflict about Sufism, which went on for a few years. But Muhammad may have seen it differently. Maybe it was my watertight rosebud dress he was seeing. Muhammad seemed to be talking a blue streak. Oh, she's crying. She's really crying now. And I thought he was joking about my being a prisoner. And then he said, "Jao," which I didn't even need a translation. It means, get out. I shot out of the hall into the front veranda. So that's the same year that Polly had the dream.
Wow.
I drew conclusions, but they might not be true. And then, I'm just going to do some excerpts here.
Mhm.
It's not the right chapter, it's this year, okay. I went to India in '88. No, is that right? Okay, here it is. We went in the fall of '87. And that's the picture of Deborah and Bill. And at one point, I think in that trip, maybe not, maybe it was '88, Mara had this diary somebody had given her. And it's like, calendar with places to write your notes and things. And she said, does anybody like this diary? And a couple people said they did, and I did too. But anyway, she gave it to me. And this was in December, I took this as meaning, 1989 was Mara's year. And it was, in many ways. So I had a friend who offered to heal my pancreas. And I said no, because I had heard Dr. Kenmore say that if he had healed his cancer, he would have dropped Baba's Divan. So I wasn't even considering doing that. But he encouraged me to try another occult practice called the will to be well. And it transmitted a hologram of wellness into your mental body. And you're supposed to lie down and do these unjamming exercises. And I have to say that I think it really did keep me well until about age 70. And after this whole was over, he was offered to do an enhancement, and I said no. Because what happened was that in the spring, I started getting pain in my abdomen. And I had this dream, sort of a little bit before that, where I dreamt that Muhammad he was lying on the floor, and I think this is one of the times they actually did think he was dying. And he was surrounded by lanterns and a few caretakers. I silently folded my hands and said, Jai Baba, but he beckoned me over and held both my hands. And then I woke up. And so when this pain started to happen, Deb Smith was living with me. And it was so bad, she took me to the emergency room. And I lay there before they could give me any painkillers, crying, really crying now, like Muhammad had said. And they did 2 days of tests and said that I had a blockage, and I had to sign something that said if I didn't have surgery, the alternative was death. So of course I had surgery. And it was so profound because they cut out 12 inches of my intestine. I had this scar going up around my belly button. But the intestines had to come back and heal. And I had to have a bowel movement before they let me out. And I remember having to learn how to fart. That happened like maybe halfway through. And I was on IVs and all this kind of stuff. And then they gave me food. And finally had a bowel movement that let me come home. And I came home on May 19th, 1989. I remember, well, so the next day was May 20th. At 9:45 a.m. India time, near midnight the night before, so midnight just after I got home, Mara passed away and was reunited with Baba. Was my surgery just a coincidence? I didn't know. It could just have been one. But somewhere in all of this, I said to myself, let this surgery be the cutting out of any past connection with the occult. Cut it out and throw it away, which I'm glad I did. I was able to return to India in September 1989 when Bao was taking people to visit Muhammad. And this time people were bringing him chocolates. Apparently there were different things and they told you what to bring. I had brought him Mr. Goodbar and 2 Snickers bars, gave them into his hands, and Bao said that I should take them back as his prasad. Then Muhammad gave us all his blessing, and of course I had to eat those chocolates right away. Later I heard Roy Hayes' story of being handed some of Muhammad's stools in 1986 wrapped in a piece of paper. And the subject of this particular section, you remember Kurds and Whey? The section is called Turds and Why. So Muhammad handed him his stools wrapped in a piece of paper. Roy was going to throw them out, but Muhammad insisted he keep them and himself put them in the pocket of Roy's jeans. On the day of his bath, Roy took the jeans off, smelled the pocket, and discovered it was filled with some prasad and pieces of candy. Roy had been given shit that turned into chocolate. I had been given chocolate that marvelously went down and touched all those tubes that had been injured and turned into shit. What a fellow that Muhammad was. So there's pictures of Mr. Goodbar and the Hershey's bars. And then there's 3 sections on occultism and what was in the discourses, and tried to link them to my experience. Mira's birthday, the first one after she died in 1989, I ended that year with a trip to Mayer Center, arriving on her birthday. Snow started falling as we reached Conway. I told Phil Smith, my traveling companion, that I wanted it to snow a lot, but not to get heavy until we got there. My wish was granted. By the time we reached the center gates, the snow had blanketed the road with light powder and was just starting to stick to the windshield. As we checked in, Jane Brown reminded us that it was Mara's birthday, the first since her passing. I would be staying in the guest house where Mara stayed long ago. And there's this wonderful picture of the snow on the guest house gates. When I arrived there, the compound was covered in a pure carpet of white, newly fallen snow. All was silent except my footsteps as I unloaded my things. After parking my car, I walked back along the path. The snow was coming faster now. Around me was the silent forest that kept out all but the faintest whisper of wind, its trees rapidly becoming outlined in fanciful dollops of this perfect, impeccable snow. Against the dark and starry night, this cozy little house in the woods looked like a 3-dimensional Christmas card sent by Baba and Mara. The next day, we trekked to Baba's house. The trees were bent over with the weight of the snow. We marveled at our luck to make it here, to be snowbound with Baba for Christmas. It snowed all that day and the next, finally reaching 17 inches.
Really?
Wow.
Fortunately, Phil and I had brought food from home. Going out to shop was impossible. That night, we hoped that dear Father Christmas would find his way down the King's Highway in his sleigh, because it's probably the only way we could get down the King's Highway, to deliver the presents of his presents to good little boys and girls. And by Christmas Day, it was all gone. So let me think if there's anything else in here that we have here. Well, I don't have the t-shirt with me, but when they did the film yesterday, you can look on YouTube and she captured all the pictures of the garments. It's called Green Peas. Muhammad the Mus popped up again in another dream. One night I dreamt I was in India with him and several children whom I brought to his feet. We were following around, and I gotta stop here actually because I need to say that I've been thinking of how to tell God Speaks for Children, and I sent Marsha to Deuce a couple of drafts, and she told me that I need to pick the right age group for whatever I was gonna do. So I hadn't done it yet. So we were following Muhammad around, and he showed me a drawing and gave me this order: collect some green peas and put them around the border. Okay, I thought, I can do that. I found some green peas and started to line them up when I woke up. While I was standing in the mirror remarking to Baba about the unusual nature of my dream, I saw the t-shirt I had worn to bed. I bought it at Sidetrack Museum in Atlanta. It was called The Solar System Made Easy. It depicted the relative size of the planets in our solar system as vegetables. Saturn was a squash, Jupiter was a cauliflower, Uranus and Neptune were tomatoes, and Earth and Venus were radishes. All around them was a rectangular border of green peas. The shirt explained the solar system in a way that was easy for people to visualize. I marveled at Muhammad's telling appearance in my dreams. I came to feel this was his way of encouraging me to try to tell the story of God Speaks for children and a general audience. And I have some examples in the book, but I don't think it's ready yet. And
So
just
you're writing God Speaks for Children?
I wrote there's a website called Atma Speaks that you can see, and it's not the greatest drawings in the world, but when I was with Hank Midland, the guy that told me about Baba, he played me a sound collage, which he doesn't even have a record of anymore. Apparently the tape is too old. But it was the ocean, the Big Bang, all the creatures, and the voices of each of these creatures melded into each other, and finally you got up and you heard a baby's cry.
Wow.
And it was just a genius thing. And it stuck with me. And so the website has each of the pages, there's a link in the table of contents at the front, and each of those things is the sound of the creature that makes that's that level. So let me show you, if I can show you the page, because it's in here somewhere. And the other thing I did do was the Seven Kingdoms collages that you may have seen at the meeting place one time back in 2000 something or other. So this website looks like this, and here's the sounds, and here's this guy's face. And he says, I remember when it all began long, long ago. And I had to have him be a Jivan Mukta because of all the people who get perfect. Many drop their bodies. Some become perfect masters, but a Jivan Mukta is the only one who stays in body but doesn't have a job. So you could tell the story of his life, his lives. And so that's the closest I got to it. And I'm going to see if there's anything else I want to read the end of here. And I tell about how I did the children's book, My Day with Meher Baba, which is 12 pictures painted by Amy Steele. And I was looking for the artist for a year and a half. And I saw the drawing that she did that was a card you could buy at the bookstore. And she did the drawings for free. I did the book for free, just paid for the printing. And her card is on the back cover of that book, but that's how we got to do that book. And I'll probably just read you the end section. This book tells how Baba answered my longing for love and changed my life. As I mentioned earlier, I now look back on these years with amazement. I was amazed that so much interchange could occur through Meher Baba's invisible help, that I'm now full of, with a sense of self still expanding. When I look back at the more than 70 years of my life, I'm struck by how much that seemed random to me at the time, such as my jobs at SRA and IBM, which you read about, actually were critical for the Baba work I did later. And I always quipped that they paid me good money to learn new and useful skills. Even though this book is about how Meher Baba opened me up to him, it's also a bit about the social history of those of us in that first generation after his passing. I see now that part of Baba's seclusion work that manifested from the end of September 1968 must have been weaving the cloth that drew us all together, we who recognized him internally this time. Over the past 50 years, I've gone to watch the story develop, the growth of Meher Center and other retreat spaces, Meherana and Prague, Oklahoma, the founding of Shariar Press and other publishers of Baba books, yearly Baba gatherings across the country, the nearby community here in Myrtle Beach. Audio and video recordings of Baba's Mandali and close ones, and the work of many artists and musicians expressing their love for him. And there are many more stories to come, many more chapters to come in his story. And if anybody wants a copy of my green card, I think I brought a piece of paper with me that you could sign. And if I didn't, well, we could put it on one of these pieces of paper. So, a number of years, maybe last year about this time, a certain political figure wanted to block people with legitimate green cards from coming in the country. And I said, that's not the green card we need. You need a universal green card, permanent residence within the orbit of my love. And I got him to sign it, see? And it's signed Emma Serrani, Director, Department of Immigration, United States of Consciousness. And it's green and white. So how do you get close to him? The green card will help. The main thing is that you know as much as you can about him, read about him, get to know the people who are close to him, and so forth. The discourses are a good source of advice. Pay attention to him more and more and yourself less and less. One good way to do this is to assign your actions to your provisional ego. And you could say that Meher Baba is my real self. I'm just dreaming or acting a character named Anna Elizabeth Giles. Meher Baba is the real author of this book and my life with all its errors and successes. And in 2013, I had a heel spur surgery, and because I couldn't get up from this low bed I was sleeping on, I moved into my back bedroom, and the wall facing the bed was empty, so I brought my Lenon painting and had it face my bed. And as I lay in bed, I felt as though he was there all the time, looking at me. I bought a small Irani prayer rug, and the guy actually knew the town in Iran that it was woven in. And I would say the prayers there in front of the painting. When I had a problem, I stood there and called it to his attention. This is the Don Stevens approach. And when I had a problem, I stood there, and when I had lost something, I told him, and when I found it, I thanked him. Sometimes, just sitting on my bed, I would feel a whiff of his presence. Some people have their altars. I have my Skype screen. And then the end is this picture of a rose hip. Oh, Baba, eventually my petals will fall off in old age, and rose hips will form for my next incarnation. But I will have bloomed. Baba, you will have bloomed in me. And so you have the watertight rosebud, and you have the open rosebud. So, I must have written this and finished it at least, I must have written that section in 2010 because I said it was 70, so I must have been 70 when I did that. Any questions?
Well, it's just, to me, like what you said about the social history, because we, like you were here before me, and I came in the Volkswagen bus just after Barbara and Malcolm, but it makes you, and then we had Atlanta together, but it really makes you appreciate how Papa was always there even when we're unconscious of him. I think these stories are really important.
And watching him set up the story.
Watching him set up
He
the
set up
story.
the thing for the press, and I watched it happen.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
he let me just be the witness, sort of, kind of, because I was the one who told him. But it's like he did that to let me see, you know, by the way, hi, I'm doing this. And who knows what the rest of the story is going to be.
Well, and I think as you have taken your time and your memory and to notice and name those things. But I think everybody's life has that, and it's such
And I was basically compelled to do it, I think. If I hadn't had that dream from Polly, and
It's amazing.
I don't think I would have necessarily done anything. But and then the other thing, I don't know if I've said this or not, but when these things happen to you, they can happen to lots of people, and they could just go over your head. But the trick is to make yourself pay attention and notice.
Yeah, that's what I think.
Because then you
Yeah.
realize, oh, he did that. That's great. So,
It's very magical.
yeah.
I really appreciated that.
And aren't we lucky? I mean, I don't know whether I'll come back in another life and there'll be churches for Bob or whatever.
Probably.
But I think we've left enough record that you won't feel the need you have to do that.
Yeah.
In fact, maybe churches are partly because they didn't have that story. They didn't know anything more than what was recorded 170 to 150 years later, and even then, maybe not the everydayness of what Jesus was like. So that we have that. We have it in this amazing, wonderful, beautiful, perfect color story of Baba's life.
And we have the internet.
Yeah.
I mean,
He invented it.